The time is at hand.
The elusive dog-like creature attacks livestock, bleeding them dry of blood.
8 to 10 feet tall, shadowy aliens.
The appearance of a mysterious monolith.
Making it rain by zapping clouds.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen.
Welcome to In Dark Places. My name is Jumbo Fugit. I'll be your tour guide. Did you watch that weird Illuminati ritual the other night? Jake Paul and Mike Tyson? What a ripoff. I was kind of thinking along the lines of Illuminati when I saw those promo pictures of Jake Paul doing the little shh hand gesture thing with his finger up to his mouth. That was the first thing that entered my mind. Illuminati. And then the fight had some elements of an Illuminati ritual in it. Kind of weird. Mike Tyson biting his glove and the passing of the torch from the old generation to the new generation and stuff like that. It was weird. But, you know, hey, I could run around in circles in a boxing ring for 16 minutes if you want to give me a couple $1 million. And now here's what's going on in the news. Rare doomsday fish spotted on a Southern California beach by Caitlin O'Kane. Thanks, Caitlin. A so-called doomsday fish has washed up on a Southern California beach, typically an extremely rare occurrence, but this is the second time this year it has happened. The rare oarfish found on Grandview Beach in Encinitas measured roughly 9 to 10 feet and was spotted by a doctoral candidate of Scripps Institute of Oceanography, the school wrote on social media. The doomsday fish got its name because it looks like a mythical sea creature with a long ribbon-shaped body that can grow up to 30 feet, according to Ocean Conservancy. Thanks, Ocean Conservancy. After doctoral candidate Allison Lafayette found the odd-looking fish, which resembles a larger than normal eel with a monstrous face, Ben Farble, manager of Scripps Oceanography Marine Vertebrate Collection, contacted the NOAA Fisheries Service team to bring the animal to its Southwest Fisheries Science Center. This oarfish is smaller than the one found in La Jolla in August of 2024. I didn't hear about that one. Researchers are not yet sure why the rare fish has washed up on California beaches recently, and there have been few studies on the species. Only 20 oarfish have washed up in California since 1901, according to the Scripps Institute, and these deep-sea dwellers usually only come ashore when they are sick, dying, or disoriented, Ocean Conservatory says. Maybe it has something to do with those wind turbines, you think? It may have to do with the changes in ocean conditions and increased numbers of oarfish off our coast, Frobel said, according to the Institute's social media post. Many researchers have suggested to this as why deep water fish strand on beaches. Sometimes it may be linked to broader shifts, such as the El Niño and La Niña cycle. But this is not always the case. There was a weak El Niño earlier this year. This wash-up coincided with the recent red tide and Santa Ana winds last week, but many variables could lead to these strandings. The researchers at Scripps took samples and froze the specimen to further study the oarfish and its biology, anatomy, genomics, and history, according to Frabel. In a comment on the post, the Institute cleared up a myth surrounding doomsday fish. There have been many questions and comments about the connection between oarfish and earthquakes, the comment states. While oarfish have a mythical reputation as predictors of natural disasters and earthquakes, experts have debunked this as folklore. A 2019 study found no correlation between oarfish or ribbonfish strandings and earthquakes in Japan. Yeah, that's because they don't have English in Japan, though. The aforementioned study, published in the Bulletin of Seismological Society of America, looked at reports of oarfish and slender ribbonfish in Japanese newspapers. Japanese folklore says the appearance of these fish means an earthquake is coming, but the researchers found there was hardly a relationship between these fish and the occurrence of earthquakes, and the newspapers likely reported the fish sightings because rare appearances might attract readers, according to the study. Where fish typically live in the mesopelagic zone, the area of the ocean least explored by scientists. They float vertically through waters 3,280 feet deep, where there is little light. Their silvery, reflective bodies help them blend in if they do hit patches of light, according to the conservatory. This week on the show, Beyond the Sea. We have ghost ships, we have sea monsters, we have it all. Right here, Beyond the Sea. And here to tell you more about it is my good friend Jimmy Haunted.
When researching sea monsters especially, a lot of them have really weird names that I'm reluctant to even talk about because I can't pronounce the name. So this one here, I thought I might be able to handle, and here's what the internet told me how they're pronounced.
We are looking at how to pronounce the name of this monstrous fire-breathing hybrid creature from Greek mythology. How do you go about pronouncing it? Chimera. 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 Here are more videos on how to
Chimera. 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 Is the ideal of banishing hunger throughout the world just a chimera?
Alright, so just when you think you got it all figured out, I get this one.
Names.com.
Chimera. Chimera.
Chimera.
Alright, we're gonna go with chimera. So let's hear about
Chimera.
the chimera. Alright, so this chimera thing here. Imagine a creature with the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and a tail that ends with the head of a serpent. It's like looking in a mirror. This terrifying creature is a real figure from Greek mythology known as the chimera. A fire-breathing beast that blends the features of multiple animals. The chimera captivates anyone interested in the mystical and the mythical. As we delve into the legends and powers of this extraordinary creature, you'll discover why it remains one of the most fascinating subjects in chimerical mythology. The chimera is a term in Greek mythology that refers to a hybrid animal made up of parts from different creatures. Traditionally, it is depicted as a fusion of a lion, snake, and a goat. It embodies the front part of a lion, the middle of a goat, and the tail ending with a snake's head. This combination makes the chimera a formidable sight, fusing the most fearsome qualities of each animal. The chimera figures prominently in a variety of Greek myths, each illustrating its monstrous nature and the human struggle against overwhelming odds. Descended from the notorious Typhon and Echidna, the chimera shares its lineage with other mythical beasts like Cerberus and the Hydra, and embodies the fears and mythical storytelling of ancient Greece.
For thousands of years, sightings of strange sea creatures have been reported around the world. Here, Janet and Colin Board argued that the ocean depths contain many creatures as yet unknown to science, and that these reports should not be discounted as wild imaginings. This is Monsters of the Deep. With more than 60% of the Earth's surface covered with water, It is hardly surprising that sightings of giant underwater monsters have been reported since antiquity. Even today, marine biologists who have long been aware of the vast unexplored depths of the Earth's oceans cautiously accept that the numerous reports of sea monster sightings seem to provide evidence that many creatures, as present unknown and unclassified, may be living in the dark and hidden waters. The biblical beast of evil, the Leviathan, the twisting serpent, the dragon that is in the sea, is mentioned in the Old Testament 5 times, and from the Norsemen to the Aborigines in Australia, from the Chinese to the American Indians. Ancient mythologies speak of giant sea serpents. Many of the earlier reports of sea monsters were collected by Scandinavian ecclesiastics. Archbishop Olaf Manson, now better known as Olaus Magnus, I still don't know him, who was exiled to Rome after the Swedish Reformation in the early 16th century, published a natural history of the northern lands in 1555 that contained reports of sea serpents. He described a sea serpent 200 feet long and 20 feet thick that would eat calves, lambs, and hogs, and would even pluck men from their boats. Archbishop Magnus also stated that the monster's appearance foretold disasters, such as wars. Interestingly, Magnus described the sea serpent as being black, having hair hanging from its neck, kind of like a mane, shining eyes, and putting its head on high like a pillar. These characteristics also appear in recent sighting reports, suggesting that Olaus Magnus was writing about the originally factual reports that had become distorted and embroidered with much retelling. 200 years later, historians were still recording sightings of sea serpents, though the clergy still maintained that these were sightings of the beast of evil. On July 6, 1764, a sea monster appeared off the coast of Greenland and was reported by a Norwegian missionary, Hans Egede. In 1741, he wrote that its body was as bulky as a ship and was 3 or 4 times as long, and that it leapt from the water and plunged back again. Another 18th century writer on the mystery of the sea serpent was the Bishop of Bergen, Erik Pontoppidan. After detailed inquiry, he found that hardly a year went by without some sea serpent sightings along the Scandinavian coastline, and he published his findings in 1752. A year earlier, Bishop Pontoppidan had arranged for a letter from Captain Lawrence von Ferry to be used to the Bergen Court of Justice, in which was described a sea serpent that the captain and his crew had seen in 1746 while rowing ashore to Molde in Norway. He said it had a gray head like a horse, large black eyes, black mouth, and a long white mane. Behind the head, 7 or 8 coils could be seen above water. Captain Von Ferry fired at it, and it sank below the water and did not reappear. 2 of his seamen, who had also been witnesses, swore on oath that the contents of the report were true. During the 18th century, the increasing importance attached to rational scientific analysis resulted in mariners' reports of monstrous sea beasts being discounted, then openly derided. A Norwegian scientist, Peter Ascanius, stated that sailors who saw a line of humps in the water were not viewing a huge water beast, but were in fact seeing a line of leaping dolphins. This doubtful explanation has since become a favorite standby for debunkers of sea monster reports. However, perhaps surprisingly, naturalists who took the time to study the reports almost invariably pronounced in favor of the sea serpent's existence. These included Sir Joseph Banks, a leading British scientist in the early 19th century, who sailed around the world with Captain Cook, and Thomas Huxley, who in 1893 wrote that there was no reason why snake-like reptiles 50 feet or more in length should not be found in the sea. American marine biologists of repute at this time agreed that the sea could very well contain unknown species of monstrous creatures, and a curator of the London Zoological Gardens, A.D. Bartlett, wrote in 1877 that it was unwise to disregard the evidence from so many different sources. Constantine Samuel Refinesque was a brilliant and controversial naturalist who made a tremendous contribution to the knowledge of American flora and fauna. Born in 1783, he immigrated to America from Europe in 1815, where he became professor of natural sciences at Transylvania University in Kentucky. Among his wide range of interests was the sea serpent, of whose existence he was fully convinced. During the first half of the 19th century, there were a great many sightings of sea serpents along the northeast American coast, centered on the fishing port of Gloucester in Massachusetts. Refinesque examined the reports and decided that they fell into 4 groups, to which he gave the generic name of Megophias, or big snake. However, there were many opponents of scientists who were investigating the unexplained phenomena of sea monsters. Among the more vociferous was Sir Richard Owen, an influential but conservative scientist of the 19th century, whom Darwin called one of my chief enemies. And I'll just tell you right now, I would be one of Darwin's chief enemies as well. Not a fan of that guy. In 1848, Owen conducted a correspondence of some acerbi with Captain Peter McCall through the columns of the Post. Their debate concerned the 60-foot sea serpent that the captain and his crew had seen in the southern Atlantic from the deck of the HMS Daedalus on August 6 that year. Although Owen used the skeptic's customary ploy of interpreting the report to fit his own preconceptions, in this case his identification was a sea lion, Captain McCall would have none of it and firmly maintained that he had seen a sea serpent.
8 scary sea creatures that really exist. Our ocean contains some of the scariest creatures that you may ever see. Take a look at just some of our favorites, which give us chills. Let's start with Mr. Anglerfish. The charming good looks of the anglerfish remain hidden in the dark as it uses a bright lure to bring unassuming prey up close to its sharp teeth. The male black devil anglers are particularly scary. After finding a female, they latch on and don't let go. Oh boy. The stargazer. This beauty sits just beneath the sand with only its eyes and sharp teeth poking out, ready to ambush its prey. It packs a punch with venomous spines and gives electric shocks. What a treat. The vampire squid. Never heard of that one. In the dark depths of the sea, this red-eyed squid has webbed arms that look like the jet black cape of a vampire when raised in defense. Using jet propulsion to fly through the water, it expels a sticky cloud of bioluminescent mucus from the tips of its arms. It probably doesn't like garlic. They tried to make a joke there. Failed. The viperfish. These deep-sea fish attract their prey using a light at the end of their long dorsal spine that flashes on and off above their head. Its teeth are so big, the viperfish can't even close its mouth. Good when it goes to the dentist. Bad for its digestive system. Okay, they gotta stop it with the jokes here. Or hire somebody else. The lamprey. This prehistoric parasitic fish could also star in a horror film. It detects vibrations in the water, then latches onto its prey, feeding on flesh or sucking blood. The lamprey is a protected species, and their return to UK rivers is a symbol of improving water quality. The scorpion fish. This camouflage expert has skin flaps that help it blend in perfectly with its surroundings, aiding its strategy as a sit-and-wait Jack the Ripper-style predator. It's one of the most poisonous fish in the world, and its large mouth allows it to swallow prey whole. How about this little fella? It's actually cute if you look it up. The red-toothed triggerfish. This little fish looks like he's dressed up for Halloween. He's going to a party with his bright red fangs. He feeds on plankton and sponges. The reality is that the red-toothed triggerfish is all gun and no bullet. And let's go to the bobbit worm. This worm may look fairly harmless wading in the sand with only a small amount of its body on show. But it's what lies beneath that makes it appear sinister, because the rest of its body could grow up to 10 feet long. The speed at which the worm attacks and the power of its mouth can snap its prey clean in two. Buckle my shoe. It then injects a toxin to stun or kill its prey. Why these sea monsters need our help? Though these species may all appear frightening to us, the scariest thing we can imagine would be if these unique creatures disappeared from our sea ocean. Threats such as increased sea temperatures caused by climate change, ocean pollution, unregulated fishing may begin to have a big effect on these fish and their habitats if we don't take action soon. To make sure this doesn't happen, we are working hard to restore our blue spaces for wildlife, people, and the planet. Okay, this is supposed to be scary here. Thank you.
Antoon Cornelius Ottermans was a Dutch biologist who came from a family of scientists. Born in 1858, he studied biology at Utrecht and became an authority on mites and ticks. He also brought his scientific skills to bear on the problem of the sea monster. Throughout his long life, he died in 1943. Ottermans collected many sighting reports and continued to speculate on the place of the sea monster in nature. His book, The Great Sea Serpent, published in 1892, is based on 187 sighting reports and was a courageous work in the contemporary skeptical climate. But it was marred by his preconception that there is only one kind of unknown sea monster, closely related to the seal family. As one would expect, sea monsters have long been a part of mariners' tales. Some reports have undoubtedly been exaggerated, but many others that made their way into the ship's logs are strangely consistent. In May of 1901, when the officers on the bridge of the steamer Grangens in the western Atlantic saw a monstrous crocodile-like creature with 6-inch long teeth splashing about on the surface, the captain refused to note the encounter in the ship's log, saying, "They will say we are all drunk, and I'll thank you, mister, not to mention it to our agents at Para or Manus." But there were others who were perhaps less careful of their reputation, such as Lieutenant George Stafford, who, as captain of the merchant ship Lady Combermere in 1820, reported seeing a mid-Atlantic serpent 60 to 100 feet long, spouting water like a whale. On May 15, 1833, 4 British Army officers and a military storekeeper were out for a day's fishing when they saw an 80-foot-long serpent swim by, not more than 200 yards away. This was at Mohone Bay, 40 miles west of Halifax, Nova Scotia. So convinced were they of the importance of this sighting that they all signed a statement and added, "There could be no mistake, no delusion, and we were all perfectly satisfied that we had been favored with a view of the true and veritable sea serpent, which had been generally considered to have existed only in the brain of some Yankee skipper, and treated as a tale not much entitled to belief. Another sighting of a crocodile-like type of sea monster was made by the captain and crew of the Eagle on March 23, 1830, a few hours before they docked at Charleston, South Carolina. Captain Deland sailed his schooner to within 25 yards of the basking creature and fired a musket at its head. When a bullet hit, the monster dived beneath the ship and struck it several times with its tail, blows strong enough to damage the craft, if not to sink her. Another military man who had a close-up view of an unknown monster from the depths was Major H.W.J. Sr. of the Bengal Staff Corps. He was traveling on the city of Baltimore in the Gulf of Aden on January 28, 1879, and saw 500 yards from the ship a head with a 2-foot diameter neck protrude from the water to a height of 20 to 30 feet. The creature was moving so rapidly he was unable to focus his field glasses upon it as it rose up, opened its mouth wide, and closed it again before submerging, only to reappear a few moments later. No body was visible, but Major Sr. described the head of it as a bulldog-like shape appearance. His report was also signed by other witnesses. In the 150 years since this sighting, sea monsters have continued to surface before startled onlookers. The intrepid transatlantic rower, Captain John Ridgway, saw a monster just before midnight on July 25, 1966. His companion, Sergeant Che Blythe, who has since become a world-famous yachtsman, was asleep. As Ridgway rowed, he heard a swishing noise, and a 35-foot-long sea serpent outlined in phosphorescence as if a string of neon lights were hanging from it, came swimming toward the boat. It dived beneath and did not reappear on the other side. An active monster in the last 50 years or so, sighted off the coast of Cornwall, England, is known as Morgwar, Cornish for sea giant. This was seen quite often during 1975 and 1976 in Falmouth Bay, and on March 5, 1976, 2 photographs of it were published in the Falmouth Packet. Although these were submitted anonymously, nevertheless they do appear very convincing, showing a long-necked creature similar to that reported to be in Loch Ness. Another strange creature has been seen in the waters of Cardigan Bay off the west coast of Wales. On March 2, 1975, 6 local schoolgirls were walking along the beach at dusk when, 200 yards away, a creature moved across the beach toward the sea. They described it as being 10 feet long, with a long neck and a tail, and large green eyes. They were quite terrified at this spectacle, and ran away to report it to the Coast Guard. Later they described it to their art teacher, Colin Palmer, who drew the creature. When he showed his sketch to the crew of a fishing boat who had seen a monster when they were fishing off Bardsey Sound, there was an instant recognition. Some of the most convincing evidence for the existence of sea monsters comes from those areas where they have been sighted repeatedly over decades, or even centuries. In the Strait of Georgia, between Vancouver Island and British Columbia, off the west coast of Canada, the creature known locally as Cadborosaurus, or Caddy, was sighted by the Indians long before the arrival of the white settlers. In the last century, an early sighting of Caddy was made by F.W. Kemp, a local government official. On August 10, 1932, Mr. Kemp was with his wife and son when they saw it swim at terrific speed through the water. Caddy was seen frequently during the 1930s, and in 1950 was sighted by Judge James Brown. Sorry, I was feeling it. And his family, when it appeared as a 45-foot-long serpent that rose out of the water several times. Mrs. R.A. Stewart, who saw it in 1963 when fishing with her husband, was terrified by its wide-open jaws. Further south on the American west coast of San Clemente Island, a favorite area for deep-sea angling, and an area where water monsters have been seen frequently throughout the centuries, when technical fishing writer J. Charles Davis interviewed numerous independent witnesses, he found their descriptions tallied to an amazing degree. Many of the witnesses were wealthy members of the big game fishing clubs who knew what to expect from the sea and had no desire to lay themselves open to ridicule.
Safe and sound at home again, let the waters roar, Jack. Safe and sound at home again, let the waters roar, Jack. Long we've tossed on the rolling main.
Tales of ghost ships have been crossing the world's oceans as long as sailors have. Sometimes these eerie tales whisper of phantom ships, harbingers of doom, while others speak of real stories where vessels have inexplicably sailed the seas long after the crew have mysteriously died or disappeared. Have you heard about the Flying Dutchman? There are dozens of legends about this mythical ship and her crew of the dead who are doomed to sail the seas until Judgment Day. It's said that the ship's captain made a deal with the devil and became famous for his ability to make the passage between Holland and Java an impossibly good time. Sure, they could outrun capture. The crew eventually committed a terrible crime, although some versions claim they became infected with the plague, and the vessel was prohibited from entering port. Undaunted by denial of entry and confident in his ability to sail through at record speed, the captain attempted to round the Cape of Good Hope during a terrible storm. Awful! When the frightened crew begged the captain to seek safe harbor, the captain swore into the wind that he and his crew would round the Cape if he had to beat about the waves until Judgment Day. The ship foundered into the storm, and all aboard perished. But true to the captain's word, Flying Dutchman continues to sail the seas with her damned crew still trying to complete her ill-fated passage. There have been hundreds who claim to have seen this ghost ship, which supposedly hovers above the waves with an eerie, glowing mist, with its masts in lieu of sails. The ship is believed to be a harbinger of imminent doom. One of the most famous sightings was reported by Prince George of Wales in the late 1800s, while making a passage off the coast of Australia between Sydney and Melbourne. He claimed at least 13 crew members spotted a glowing phantom ship at 4 a.m. The omen manifested itself later that day when the crewman who originally spotted the Flying Dutchman fell from the foretop mast and was smashed to atoms. Atoms! How about the Octavius? Legend says Octavius was found adrift off Greenland in 1775. When she was boarded, her crew was found frozen and perfectly preserved. The captain was found seated in his cabin, frozen in place, while making his last entry in the logbook. The date of the entry was 1762, meaning the frozen crew had been sailing the Arctic for 13 years. Though there are those who swear the legend of Octavius is true, no actual record of the vessel has been found, leading some to believe that it might be mistelling of the Bechimo ghost ship. But you'll have to wait for the next installment of our stories to find out why. And I will keep you in suspense. This is the story of Bechimo. Bechimo was a Swedish cargo steamship built in 1914. It was used for trade between the Inuit natives of Victoria Island and settlers of the Northwest Territory. In 1931, Bechimo became trapped in ice, and the crew abandoned ship, setting up camp nearby. They briefly reboarded when the ship temporarily broke free, but it soon became icebound again. All but a 15-man skeleton crew were airlifted away, while the remaining crew kept watch over the trapped vessel and its cargo from a nearby shelter. During a violent blizzard, Bechimo disappeared, and the crew assumed she broke apart during the storm and sank. However, days later, the vessel was spotted 45 minutes away, again trapped in ice. Her crew was able to retrieve the cargo, but made no attempt to salvage the boat, which seemed to be on the brink of sinking. But Bechimo did not sink, as there were at least 11 reported sightings of the derelict ship over the next 4 decades. The last sighting was reported by an Inuit fisherman who spotted her off the Alaskan coast, trapped in ice, in 1969, 38 years after the crew abandoned her. Dubbed the Ghost Ship of the Arctic, in 2006, the Alaskan government established a committee to determine her fate. However, she has never been spotted again, and her ultimate fate is unknown.
Lever, Johnny, lever, oh, lever, Johnny, lever, oh, the voyage is done, and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us.
How about the Watertown Ghosts? While making way off the Mexican coast in the mid-1920s, 2 crew members of the SS Watertown were asphyxiated by gas fumes while cleaning out a cargo hold. The bodies of the deceased crewmen were buried at sea. The following day, just before dark, the entire ship was in an uproar when crew reported seeing ghosts of the 2 men in the water at the ship's stern. The sightings continued, and a crewman claimed he had been able to snap a picture providing their existence with a camera. With the film untouched and left inside the camera, the captain delivered the camera to a commercial photographer to develop the images and authenticate the photo, which shows the faces of 2 men in the waves. To this day, the image of the Watertown Ghosts is believed by many to be a legitimate paranormal photograph of ghosts at sea.
Johnny, lever, oh, the voyage is done, and the winds don't blow.
A ghost ship, also known as a phantom ship, is any maritime vessel that is found empty and adrift with no explanation as to the whereabouts or fate of the crew. These ships are often discovered with signs of sudden abandonment, and sometimes the crew's personal belongings are still on board, which deepens the mystery. Ghost ships have been a part of seafaring lore for centuries, dating back to the legendary Flying Dutchman, purported to be eternally condemned to sail the oceans. M.V. Lyubov Orlova. This former Soviet cruise ship turned ghost ship presents one of the more recent and bizarre tales. Originally decommissioned and sold for scrap, the Orlova broke free from its towing line in the North Atlantic while being transported from Canada to the Dominican Republic. Canadian authorities chose not to retrieve it once it drifted into international waters. Its last known position was recorded via signals from the emergency beacons, typically activated when the ship sinks. However, no wreckage was found, and rumors abound that it might still be drifting uncrewed and unseen. The SS John Singh. The SS John Singh was discovered adrift in the Gulf of Carpentaria off the northern coast of Australia. When Australian authorities boarded the abandoned ship, they found no crew or identifying marks. The ship's origins and fate of its crew remain unknown, and it was eventually sunk by the Australian Navy, as it posed a significant hazard to navigation. High Aim 6, 2003. The Taiwanese fishing vessel was found drifting in Australian waters. What makes the High Aim 6 one of the most puzzling cases is that the crew vanished while the ship was stocked with a large catch and fuel. Personal belongings remained undisturbed, and the captain's logbook stopped abruptly with no signs of distress or struggle. Aliens. The most recent recorded instance of a ghost ship was in January 2021 when a fishing trawler was found off the coast of Liberia. The vessel devoid of all crew but containing their belongings, had drifted across the Atlantic. This case underscores that even with modern technology, the sea retains its capacity for mystery and reminds us that not all sea tales have been regulated to the past. Theories about modern ghost ships range from piracy and mutiny to insurance fraud and more supernatural explanations. Technological failures, harsh environmental conditions, and human error are often at the core of these theories. For instance, the crew might abandon ship during a severe storm, thinking the vessel would sink, only for it to remain afloat and be discovered later. In other cases, criminal activities or geopolitical situations can lead to crews being forcibly removed or fleeing their ships. For every mystery solved, others remain or emerge, keeping the legend of ghost ships alive.
How about the Orang Medan? There is some skepticism as to whether Orang Medan actually existed, but its legend is well known. Around 1948, Morse code distress signals were picked up by several ships off the coast of Indonesia. The vessel in distress was a Dutch freighter called Orang Medan, a Malay name meaning the man from Medan. Though the distress calls were intermittent and garbled at times, nearby ships were able to ascertain that the captain and all the officers were dead. The entire crew was in jeopardy, and after several attempts at additional transmissions, a final message simply said, "I die." Shortly after the last transmission, a vessel responding to the distress was able to locate Orang Medan. The ship appeared to be in sound condition, but there was no response to the attempts to make contact, so a boarding party was dispatched. Upon entering the ship, they found a terrifying scene. The entire crew was found dead. Their bodies were contorted with arms outstretched, eyes wide open, and expressions of horror on their faces. Even the ship's dog was found dead, baring his teeth at some phantom adversary. Yet, upon closer observation, no injuries were observed on any of the bodies. After some deliberation, a decision was made to tow the vessel to port to investigate the tragedy. However, as the salvaging crew prepared to tow the vessel, smoke began to pour out of the hull. The crew was forced to abandon the ship and cut the lines to escape the thick smoke. Moments later, Orang Medan exploded. Macabre speculation continues to surround the fate of the freighter and her fortunate crew. There are those who believe that the crew was terrorized by demons or extraterrestrials. Other stories claim the ship was carrying gruesome chemical weapons that accidentally killed the unprotected civilian crew charged with transporting them. And of course, there are conspiracy theorists who say it was a military crew disguised aboard a civilian ship, carrying a mystery weapon that may have changed the course of history had Orang Medan not met an untimely end.
Hey, roll and go, the anchor's on board and the cable's on store.
And that's about all the time we have for the big show this week. We're woefully out of time. Hopefully. Thanks for listening. Thanks as always, Jimmy Haunted. We'll see you again right here next week. God bless.